And yikes! Did y'all see what the Texans did to them? They are rightly out of control of a playoff spot for that one. The Texans put them in timeout. Welcome to the jungle, everyone. I'm Kyle Phelps, and the teams that ultimately won't matter are starting to kind of weed themselves out a little bit. Week 16 is in the books, so let's go ahead and talk about the power rankings for Week 17. But before we get to that, I'd just like to ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. It really helps my channel out immensely, and you become the first to know when I put out my Bengals previews with our excellent team of correspondents before each Bengals game, my Bengals recaps after the games, power rankings like this after each NFL week, and then, at that point we're covering the whole NFL, not just the Bengals, and the Battle of Ohio podcast clips twice a week. It's all stuff that you're not going to want to miss, so go ahead and hit that button. You know you want to. So, as always, we do these power rankings through the use of a tier list. Basically, the idea is we talk about each category as a whole, so that all the individual teams can get a little bit of attention each, instead of only focusing on the top 10 or something like that. That way, we can keep the video to a watchable length without having to ignore half the teams in the NFL, and, ultimately not having like a 45-minute long video that nobody's actually going to watch. We always start out with tank time, which is basically the teams that are completely dead in the water. So at this point, it might be worth focusing more on trying to jockey for draft positioning, because honestly, that's like the only thing worth even shooting for at this point. Then we move on to the bad teams. This category is kind of like a no man's land. It's almost worse being in this category than in tank time, because you've already won too many games to bother tanking. You're not going to get anything good by doing that. And they're almost definitely not going to have any chance, if they haven't already been eliminated, of being able to compete for a playoff spot. Next, we move on to the playoff hunt. These teams are either not currently in the playoff picture, or they're in it currently, but in my opinion, they still need to do a little bit of work to convince me that they're actually worthy of picking up or holding on to their playoff spot. Next up, it's the playoff hopefuls, and these are the teams that I don't think they're, guaranteed to make a playoff spot, but I think they've got what it takes to come down with one of those spots. These teams have done enough to convince me that they are worthy of being in that position, and this is basically where the playoff hunt teams are aspiring to get to. Obviously, this category goes down to the number 16 team, so not everybody actually is going to make it, but these are the teams that I think have probably the best shot at doing it. The next category is the contenders, and for my money, these teams are virtually guaranteed to make the playoffs. If any of them miss, I'll be absolutely shocked. If they haven't already clinched. They're also probably going to make some noise in the playoffs when they get there. Finally, it's the Super Bowl caliber teams. Basically, my top 5 teams that I think have the best shot at representing their individual conference in the Super Bowl this year. Let's go ahead and kick it off with tank time. We're starting out with our number 32 team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am so sorry for everything that has happened to you, Trevor Lawrence. You were supposed to be the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. But I'm sorry, I think the Jaguars are stunting your growth. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying his career is doomed to mediocrity or anything. But he and the Jaguars are definitely getting a late start considering everything that's happened this year, and also considering the fact they can't even beat the Jets. And speaking of the Jets are my number 31 team, if that is any indication of how bad that loss was. But for the Jets, Zach Wilson looked good this week. I mean, that's got to soothe some of the anxiety that people got about him in Jersey B, right? I don't know, hopefully. Their Jersey brothers, the Giants, are right behind them at number 30. And, I'm not going to lie. I was a little excited to see Jake Fromm get his first start in the NFL. I thought he was going to be pretty decent coming out of college. I thought he was worthy of a second-round pick myself. But, obviously that was maybe a little bit short-sighted because he ended up getting re-benched for Mike Glennon, who got benched for him. So that's not going to help your cause, man. Number 29 is Detroit Lions, and I'm so sad. I'm just so sad for the Lions, man. They almost won another game. I was getting ready to consider taking them out of tank time entirely. Because, you know, like once you win the third game, then it's like, is it really, you know, like, is tanking going to do much anymore? I don't know. But, I don't know. I think Dan Campbell deserves at least that. At least a team that can win 3 games in a season, you know. But, you know, it is what it is, and Detroit Lions, you're at 29. Finally, it's the Carolina Panthers at number 28, and they honestly might be in a worse position than the Detroit Lions right now. I know I've got them at 28 and the Lions are at 29, but things are not looking good for the Carolina Panthers. And you actually already kind of seem to have people starting to turn on Matt Rule. And trust me, I get it. You know, they're currently on pace for the same number of wins they had last year, which is 5. And, you know, if you're not improving from 5, then there's something wrong. So you can't even really make the argument that they're improving. But I also agree with Matt Rule that sometimes it takes time for a plan to develop. We kind of saw that with, you know, my Bengals and Zach Taylor. You know, things are developing this year, but everybody was screaming 6-25-1 after the first 2 years. So I guess for now, let's stand by and see if they give them another year to make up for the epic collapse that has been 2021. Next up, it's the bad teams. We got the Seattle Seahawks starting off at number 27. And is there any chance that Russell Wilson might agree to stick around and help this team rebuild? Because if not, maybe the best idea is to tank. Because, you know, I know Russell Wilson is never going to accept tanking. He would abhor the idea of ever even, like, you know, thinking about tanking. But, you know, if Russell Wilson really truly does want out, and he's completely checked out of the whole Seattle system anyway, then who cares what he thinks, really, seriously. Number 26 is the team that beat them, the Chicago Bears, and it seems like Matt Nagy keeps avoiding, just narrowly avoiding, these obvious firing situations. And I would think they'd have to pull the plug by the end of the year, right? Like, at the end of the year. Because, I mean, the system's clearly failed, and you might ruin young Justin Fields if you keep him stuck in that system for too long. Number 25, it's the Washington football team. And, man, I really thought they had a chance to, you know, make a push at it a couple weeks ago. But it, you know, after that performance against the Cowboys and letting the Cowboys drop more points than anybody else has scored all season, it makes you really wonder if they were ever really in it to begin with. Number 24, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And was that game all the proof that you guys needed to admit that this Steelers team is just trash this year, that there's nothing to it? You know, oh, they might look like they're in the playoff hunt, but I'm like, come on, guys, this team's not making it into the playoffs. Did you see the way they played? Did you see the way they played all season, except against, like, these weird random games where they somehow stay alive? Finally, at number 23, it's the Houston Texans, and I'm so proud of you guys, man. Over the last month, the Texans, nobody gave them a chance. They've risen up out of the tank time category, and they've come oh so close to the playoff hunt. Well, you know, I mean, not the actual playoff hunt. You can't really be near the actual playoff hunt with 4 wins. But they absolutely blew the Chargers out of the water this week. And that's a contending team, you know? That's a team that's like, you know, maybe they're going to make the playoffs, maybe they're not going to make the playoffs. I don't really know right now. But that's a team that some people had pegged as a Super Bowl contender at the beginning of the season. So that's impressive. You know, they might not be anywhere near making the playoffs this year. But that was the performance of a team that I think in a few years could be right back to relevancy. This rebuild, maybe there's something to it with David Culley at head coach. Unfortunately, for now, I can't really put them any higher than this. Moving on to the playoff hunt, we're going to start off with number 22. It's the New Orleans Saints. And it's still possible, man. Their hopes really took a hit this week after getting smacked around by the Miami Dolphins. Hopefully they won't need Ian Book to start at quarterback again. But they could still sneak into that number 7 seed if they win out and, you know, get a little bit of luck. Number 21, got the Atlanta Falcons. They're basically in the same spot as the Saints this week. Difference being that they won. Now, they almost choked away that game to the Detroit Lions, so I don't want to give them too much credit. But it's still possible for them to make the playoffs. I'm not buying it just yet. Number 20, you got the Minnesota Vikings, who have fallen all the way out of control of a playoff spot. And, it's like if only they were better at winning one-score games. Can you imagine how much different the NFL landscape would be this year if they were better at putting away one-score games? Maybe that's actually a good idea for a video that I could produce in the off-season, and then we could, explore just, all the nooks and crannies of how that would basically change everything if the Vikings were actually good at putting away one-score games this year. I don't know. We'll see. But I got the Denver Broncos at number 19, and they're still in it too, but they're, one loss away from getting eliminated. I felt like they had a great opportunity to get back on track against the Raiders this week. But, it clearly wasn't meant to be. And the Broncos in the playoffs, also probably not meant to be. At number 18, I've got the Cleveland Browns. And, they got their work cut out for them, man. The playoffs are still a pretty decent possibility, though. They need a win out to get there, but if they do, then there's still a pretty good chance that they could go wrestle away one of those playoff spots. Finally, at number 17, I got the Baltimore Ravens. And, I do empathize with you guys, with how much crap that they've had to put up with this year. I get it. I've watched the Bengals be the most injured team in the NFL for like 2 years straight. So, if anyone understands it, I understand it. But, unfortunately, the power rankings are a cold, unfeeling mistress, and all they know is that the Ravens have just been doing nothing but losing lately. And they got a pretty good reason for losing, so they're probably going to continue losing. And after they let Joe Burrow almost break the single-game passing yards record, I think it's probably clear that they're just a little bit too banged up to be competitive at this point. Kicking off the playoff hopefuls, at number 16 is the Las Vegas Raiders. Every other week, this team looks at the NFL and they're like, hey, I ain't hear no bell. And they pull a huge key win out of their ass, despite looking completely down for the count before. You gotta give them credit, though, for staying in the hunt against the Denver Broncos and sweeping them. Number 15, the Arizona Cardinals feel like they're free-falling. The loss to the Colts might not have been as painful because the Colts are a really good football team had they not just gotten blown out by the Lions last week. But they did, and now the situation is what it is, and I'm struggling to think, is this Arizona Cardinals team, they're clearly a playoff team. But are they going to do anything when the playoffs come? At number 14, it's the Miami Dolphins. And they really do feel like a legit playoff team now because the Saints were also competing for their playoff lives in that game. Now, it came against Ian Book, and there's some questions about strength of competition here. And it's like, yeah, they've won 7 in a row. But those wins came against the Texans, Ravens, Jets, twice, Panthers, Giants, and like I said, Ian Book's Saints. Now, the Ravens win was huge for them at the time because, that one was on Thursday Night Football, and the Ravens hadn't quite, started experiencing the total attrition of their entire football team at that point. But other than the Ravens game, I'm just not particularly impressed by any of those wins, especially with, the way that their offense has looked, extremely one-dimensional. Number 13, the Philadelphia Eagles have won 5 of their last 6 games to get to this point. There's some questions about quality of competition with them too, but they were hanging around top quality teams earlier in the year. They weren't winning those games, but they were just hanging around, and there were a couple instances like when they almost beat the Buccaneers. So I think the Eagles have a little bit of respectability to them. Number 12 is the Los Angeles Chargers, and yikes. Did y'all see what the Texans did to them? They are rightly out of control of a playoff spot for that one. The Texans put them in timeout. Finally, at number 11, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And congratulations, Bengals. You beat the shit out of the Ravens JV squad. Now, to be fair, the Bengals did do the same thing, and actually they did it a little bit better, to the Baltimore Ravens and all their starters earlier in the year. Cool. Now go do it against the Chiefs, and we'll talk about letting you back into the top 10. But, until then, forgive me if I'm a little skeptical. We're on to the contenders now, starting at number 10 with the San Francisco 49ers. They're down this week because they lost to the Titans. But the way they've been playing lately, I think they're as hot as anybody. Speaking of the Titans, they're also a contender at number 9. The fact that they've been hanging around this long without Derrick Henry is damn impressive. Can you imagine what happens when they get him back? Good God. Number 8, the New England Patriots are taking a dive this week after losing to the Bills. Their stint in the top 5 was honestly really contingent on them continuing to make statement wins like they have been pretty much, the last 2 months or so. They got out to such a rough start that they really didn't have too much wiggle room when it came to what they were doing on a week-to-week basis. And that's reflected by the fact that now they're in control of a wild card seed instead of in control of the AFC East, which the Bills are in control of. At number 7, it's the Buffalo Bills, who beat the New England Patriots. The Bills got off to a really hot start this year, and they needed a win like this, where they really soundly beat a really tough opponent to show that they're not just fizzling out at crunch time like they kind of have tended to do every year. And boy, did that come through this week. Finally, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are at number 6 because beating the hell out of the Panthers was great. It wasn't like super mind-bendingly impressive, but point is they got the job done and they maintained their status at being this high for another week. Finally, we got the Super Bowl caliber teams kicked off by the Indianapolis Colts at number 5 this week. Now, for most purposes, this is by far and away the best team in the AFC South and one of the best teams in the AFC in general. They're going to have to make the playoffs, unfortunately, due to wild card because they had a slow start and, the Titans are the Titans. But whatever, though. Honestly, I don't think it matters where they play in the playoffs. I think they're going to be dangerous either way. Dallas Cowboys are at number 4, and they now have the highest single-game point total in the NFL after what they did to the Washington football team this week. Shout out, by the way, to Majestic YT, who commented on last week's Power Rankings video. He said he'd move the Patriots below the Cowboys because they have one more win, and they won head-to-head before their win streak started. That's actually why I had them ahead of the Cowboys in the first place. The Patriots over the last, like I said, 2 months or so seem to be a completely different team than the one that got off to that really slow start. So I was just basing it off of basically, what have you done for me lately kind of mentality. But the Bills just exposed them this week, so you got your wish, Majestic YT. Thanks for commenting. Next, at number 3, it's the LA Rams, and they proved that they don't even need Matt Stafford to have a good game for them to be able to win. Now, granted, Matt Stafford had a really, really bad game, but that's why he moved away from Detroit, right? So, it's like when he does have games like this, he doesn't have to feel like it's the end of the world because the Rams can still come away with a win, even if he's not on his game that day. Now, at number 2, I'm doing something interesting. I'm moving the Green Bay Packers down, even though they won, for 2 reasons. One is because I'm extremely unimpressed by the way that they beat the Cleveland Browns this week. Baker Mayfield's out here throwing with half an arm, and, the Browns have a bunch of injured players and guys coming off of COVID and everything like that. And, this just really wasn't the best Cleveland Browns team. So if the Packers are really the best team in the NFL, they should have smoked them. And they didn't. They almost lost. And then the other reason is because the Kansas City Chiefs are my number 1 team this week because they absolutely beat the piss out of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was glorious. And arguably, the Pittsburgh Steelers were about the same level of competition as the Browns at this point. So, based off of that performance, I gotta say that right now, the Chiefs look like the best team in the NFL. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Did I have your favorite team too low? Too high, maybe? Do you think that I was too hard on the Bengals when other outlets had them already back up in the top 10? Or did you have anything else that you want to say? Let me know in the comments, and as always, I'll feature the best ones in my next Power Rankings video, just like I did with Majestic YT's comment, because I actually thought he had some pretty good insight there, and I wanted to address that. But thanks so much for watching, guys. You can always find more of what I do at KylePhelps92 on Twitter, Facebook.com/ThePhelps, my Bengals coverage at ATBNetwork.com/Cincinnati Bengals, the Battle of Ohio podcast, which is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and right here if you subscribe. But like I said, thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see how the playoff picture shapes up after Week 17 and we go into the Week 18 NFL Power Rankings. So for now, I'll leave y'all, as always, with a hootie!